On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there is having themselves a great day. They are panicking. There's a lot of evidence to suggest this. Now, the way people are back-talking, Chris Wallace, for example, got all sorts of goodies on him. The way they're talking about Trump and the doctors, whether we can trust the doctors, not trust the doctors, the way that this is being played out. This is the deep state at its very finest, at its typical, at its best. But what's also funny, and I've got an article here that sort of talks to this point, I think a lot of people are starting to wake up, and this is what created the Trump. This is what created this whole movement that's pushing against the deep state. It's the fact that we've seen for years nothing happen. We've seen for years people have the second-tiered system. We've seen for years just making laws that take away our freedoms and take away our freedoms and take away our freedoms and keep blaming it on other things. This is what we've grown up to find. So one information we've got here, we've got live updates from Trump. I want to get into the news. Got some great news. We're going to get right into that. And so this is the Trump, his doctors telling us what's going on, telling us where some of these misunderstandings maybe came from, whatever the case is. It's a really good little piece of work. Again, you don't trust them, do trust them. It doesn't really matter to me. I think it's his doctors. I think they're doing the best to say what they can. But they can't release information. You have HIPAA, right? You have HIPAA laws. They can't just say whatever they want. They can't just talk about Trump if Trump's not cool with that. So again, there's some issues that come around some of that. So let's see what he's got to say.
I'd like to take this opportunity now, given some speculation over the course of the illness, the last couple of days, update you on the course of his own illness. Thursday night into Friday morning when I left the bedside, the president was doing well, with only mild symptoms, and his oxygen was in the high 90s. Late Friday morning when I returned to the bedside, the president had a high fever and his oxygen saturation was transiently dipping below 94%. Given these two developments, I was concerned for possible rapid progression of the illness. I recommended the president we try some supplemental oxygen, see how he'd respond. He was fairly adamant that he didn't need it. He was not short of breath. He was tired, had the fever, and that was about it. And after about a minute, on only 2 liters, his saturation levels were back over 95%. He stayed on that for about an hour, maybe, and it was off and gone. Later that day, by the time the team here was at the bedside, the president had been up out of bed, moving about the residence with only mild symptoms. Despite this, everyone agreed the best course of action was to move to Walter Reed for more thorough evaluation and monitoring. So the chief and I work side by side, and I think his statement was misconstrued. What he meant was that 24 hours ago, when he and I were checking on the president, that there was that momentary episode of the high fever and that temporary drop in the saturation, which prompted us to act expediently to move him up here. Fortunately, that was really a very transient, limited episode. A couple hours later, he was back up, mild again. I'm not going to speculate what that limited episode was about so early in the course, but he's doing well.
So based off everything, it doesn't sound like the president's doing poorly. In fact, there's also been some reports that he's bored. The dude wants to get out of there. They're talking about possibly releasing on Monday. We'll see how it plays out. I don't want to get out in front of this, but for sure, I'm sure the president can be set up in the White House and feel like he's doing stuff, wear a mask. I'm sure there's all sorts of things they can do, and so long as he's not on camera looking all, weak and stuff, he'll be fine. But he wants to get back to work, and that sounds kind of like the guy that we elected, doesn't it? So, again, we'll see how it plays out. One thing that they're certainly doing, and this would continue even if he goes back to the White House and leaves Walter Reed, right? But he's got an antibody cocktail that he's taken. It's supposed to help boost his immune system. There's all sorts of good stuff, lions, tigers, and bears ground up inside of it, and all sorts of great things. It's really none of those things I just said. It's like vitamins and some other blah-de-blahs, right? Some regimen that they're doing. So whatever. It's, he's got the best physicians. Like the dude's lab coat just says like physician to the president. Like that's a pretty cool title. Hard to top that one. So again, they're abusing and misusing this whole concept. They're trying to say, he's going to die, he's teetering any second, who knows what could happen. Now, of course, there's a lot of people that have wished ill will against the president. I want to remind everyone to just keep him in our prayers. Keep anybody who's sick in our prayers. Even if there's some Democrats that are sick, keep them in our prayers too, because that's the better way. We're all trying to get to the same place. It's ridiculous how many people have wished ill upon this man. Now, again, the whole focus here is how the deep state really is trying to push narratives, trying to create fear, trying to create division, trying to create disharmony. It's not just here in the United States, folks. The United States is going to define what happens to the rest of the world, but it's certainly happening in other places. So right now, India test fires a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile as border tensions rise. Now, one of the biggest concerns India has, they got Pakistan that hates them, and then they've got China that they're having some issues with right now too. And in fact, the Soviet Union, Russia, recently gave some of those S-400s or let them buy some of those S-400 missiles. And so India's now got those. And Russia oddly told China, the ones we told the S-400s we were going to give you, no, not so much right now. Because Russia's mad at China as well, one, for ripping off all their technology. They keep stealing these fighters that look surprisingly like Sukhoi fighters from the Soviet Union. Russia, sorry, I don't know why I keep calling it that. It's like been, 40 years since they've been in the Soviet Union. That being said, they've got their crazy little cool hypersonic missile, and we are for sure gonna watch that because it's freaking cool. Who doesn't want to watch a missile launch? Get out of Dodge. Let's check it out.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now +1, +2, and counting up.
Particle taken off. Page down confirmed. Particle health normal.
That is just so super cool. I absolutely love that. I don't know if that's like an extra booster that came peeling off there at the end, but whatever the case was, super groovy. So again, somewhat of it's show of force, some of it's to, hey, guess what? We've got crazy stuff too, guys. We could all annihilate each other if we want to. So let's come to the talking board, or let's come to the drawing board, we should say, and have a discussion. But apparently, also a little factoid here. What makes it hypersonic? Mach 7.5. 7.5 times the speed of sound. Holy crap, that's fast. That's 5,754 miles per hour. I bet it gets really good gas mileage, right? It's one of those like electric ones. It's not true. Making that up. Now, this is, again, the example of how the deep state plays. They, one, like to talk about things and just exaggerate them. Two, they actually are actively trying to change history or change people's understanding of history. Now, for those of you that don't know this, the Democratic Party actually was the Confederate Party. It was the Confederate. That was the people of the South, the people that were against slavery, against giving women the rights to vote, at least a majority of them were. They've been against a lot of this kind of civil rights stuff for eons. The Ku Klux Klan was a part of the Democratic Party or the Confederacy. So the history of the Democratic Party sucks, and it's something that truly haunts the deep state, because right now the progressive and all these people are part of this party and unfortunately have a lot of egg on their face. So interesting, college professors are likening President Trump to the Southern slaveholders. Again, pot kettle. They are desperately trying to change the history of the world. This is what's being taught in the schools. That's why he's talking about this with the 1669, whatever the hell that stupid thing was, right? Versus the actual history of the 1776, the fact that we weren't just built on the backs of slaves, which is pretty absurd because really immigrants have played one of the largest roles in creating this country. Look at New York, for instance. All the people that built the skyscraper, it wasn't like slaves. That was like immigrants from other countries, like Irish and the Italians and the Puerto Ricans and there's a whole bunch of people that were coming to New York at that time of their lives, and that was one of the jobs that was out there. So, again, not cool, but it's the way the game is played. Now, how else is the game played? Well, we've coincidentally had a virus breakout a while back when a lot of this heavy stuff was starting to come through, right? We had the Durham investigation. Bill Barr's like, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Trump's been basically leaking stuff as he could. Lindsey Graham, and I'm drawing a blank on the head of the senator right now, Mitch McConnell, I think it is. All these people have been talking a lot of talk. And they're bringing people in. We're going to talk to you. We're going to make you put your hand up and all this stuff. Well, McCabe's like, no, I'm not going to testify before the Senate committee. Sorry, I'm afraid I might get sick, because Trump's been walking around and everybody that's got COVID, it's Trump's fault. So, again, they're taking advantage of it. Now, a lot of you are like, hey, that's not cool, and when is this going to change, and who's going to throw up the hands, and who's going to throw the flag, or give someone a red card, or whatever the hell we do to fix this. And that's going to happen post-election. A lot of stuff's going to happen. These people are going to do a little song and dance, yada, yada, because the deep state's all in. Deep state's all in right now, folks. If they don't win, they know it's end. They know it's done. They know it's game over. There's not a lot they can do after that. When Trump wins this final election, we need you to vote. It's going to be the if part. We need you to vote. You have to. Got to get out there and vote. When Trump wins, there's 4 years where he can just continue to steamroll like a tube of toothpaste, just rolling it up from the bottom. All the deep state's starting to ooze out, and there's not a whole lot they can do to stop it. Now, the thing that's tripping me out the most and really inspired this entire episode, angered Americans stepped into Chris Wallace's beautiful cake. Oh, Chris Wallace. Oh. So the frustration here, Bill, is this, that here was my debate book, and literally hundreds of man hours and woman hours between me and my researchers went in to try to prepare a serious, substantive debate. And on so many issues, Biden's tax and spending plans, Trump's climate and environmental policies, I was really hoping that for the debate that I think America wanted to see, which was a serious exchange of views. And I felt like I had gotten together all the ingredients. I had baked this beautiful, delicious cake, and then, frankly, the president put his foot in it. And that was frustrating for me because I tried hard to prepare for a serious debate. Chris Wallace, I don't like you. You're a deep state piece of poo, and thank you very much. The thing that really gets them, the political elite remained puzzled and in agony over how Donald Trump could be in the race still. He was a bullying debater. He was a purveyor of mistruths. He was a would-be autocrat. How has this country come to this place? And the answer sat staring at them on a video link this Wednesday in the smug countenance of James Comey. This obvious truth will be missed by the left and the media, which continue to comfort themselves with the fiction that Mr. Trump won in 2016 by preying on the weak and ill-informed. And the opposite is true. The businessman was propelled to office on the fury of those who had seen too much. They'd watched for decades as the insulated elected class, the Democrat and Republicans alike, broke promises, failed to solve problems, and blamed it on the system. These voters had watched the swamp take over. IRS targeters, self-righteous prosecutors, zealous regulators armed with stunning powers, and a mentality that they were entitled to make the rules to tell the little people what was best for them. Voters fumed over this double standard. Hillary Clinton's deleted government emails with abandon, while a 77-year-old Navy veteran went to prison for building a pond in contravention of navigable water rules. Mr. Comey personifies what enrages those Americans. His testimony this week was a vivid reminder that the election won't hinge only on the issues as defined by the media elites. Tuesday's brawl was mostly about the virus, the economy, violence in the streets, the Supreme Court. But November's vote for many Americans will be a choice between an administration that believes we the people should run Washington and those who believe the swamp should rule the masses. And that truly is speaking to the reality of where we're at in the world right now. There was definitely two factions at work. A deep state, for lack of better ways to describe it, and essentially freedom-loving constitutionalists, people that are all about we the people, the original Constitution of the United States. Former CIA Director John Brennan, had a basic disagreement, it seems, with the NSA, which kind of goes back to a funny little thing. It seemed that in this whole Russia thing, that the CIA director, John Brennan, and the FBI, James Comey, were definitely in agreement that it was all about Russia. They had pretty solid evidence, even though they felt that it was supposedly kind of mid-level, that the sources were so good that we can trust this 100%, that it becomes a high confidence that this is true. When the NSA said, we got medium confidence, we don't necessarily agree with you, and there you go as the game is played. We have two agencies that definitely do not like each other, definitely do not play well together. Snowden oddly worked for both. Interesting. So again, as the game is played, as the information warfare is done, and remember the media, the mainstream media, the majority of the media, most of these news sites, with the exception, I guess, of some of these free fringe ones, right? But a lot of these sites are deep state. That's where they're getting their information. So again, we've got to be careful what we trust, what we listen to. Now, just to remind people of the wonderful world that we can expect post the election, which I've got a neat little piece of information around that. But right now, shootings surge, apparently, in Los Angeles. That's about 50 miles from where I live. And shootings have surged in good old-fashioned Eric Garcetti's Los Angeles. He's talking about a large number of people that have been shot. So it looks like he's indicted that as of Friday, October 2nd, 40 people under the age of 18 had been shot in the city, including 9 under the age of 10. This is a pace of shooting and violence that we've not seen in years, and it has grown from an effort that began and issues that we saw in June and July, and now has continued to accelerate, Moore said. This is violence that's impacting not just people standing on our corner against other individuals standing on a corner. This is violence that is hitting our very young and our very innocent. There's a lot of people that are lining out up in the streets that have nothing better to do, that have been living with mom and dad, maybe in their basements, maybe in their upstairs, and they just hate America because that's what they've been taught in school. So they're angry, and they're going out and doing things they shouldn't be. Again, it's pretty sad to see what's happening in some of these cities. Now, of the top 20, 18 of them are actually Democrats. So again, majority by far. Now, Trump got in trouble for saying all of them. All right, 2 of them aren't. And of the top 50, most of those for sure, hands down, are Democrat. But whatever. Now, speaking of Democrats, cities that are doing the great and awesomeness of mail-in voting and really handling it like you would expect. I mean, just bang up jobs, bang up examples of how 1% of votes can be lost. Yeah, nearly 18,000 ballots rejected of the total of over 1.7 million people who voted in the primary. 18,000 of that is 1%. So 1% of all the votes just lost. I don't know what happened to them. Don't know. I don't know. They could have caught fire, could have gotten baked into a cake, could have fallen in a river. We don't know. We don't know what happened. They could have gone to the moon. It's possible. They might have, like, sat on like a geyser and, right? Maybe. Doubt it, though. So, yeah, a bunch of ballots thrown out, counted slightly less than 2%. It's way less than 2%. In fact, it's just barely over 1%, but whatever. Still roughly half these votes getting close, right? I mean, again, it's the whole thing. Just vote by mail. If you want to guarantee your vote, you go in person. You go in person, there's no question. A little machine, beep, 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 and you're done, and you voted, and it's accurate. It's counted right then and there. And by the end of that day, everybody knows exactly how many in-person votes happened and what they were. And they know exactly what they were for. Voting by mail, question mark. It's just a question mark. There's a lot of factors that come into play. You've got the post office. You've got things that could potentially happen when they're in the post office. You got people that might mess with them when they're in mailboxes and whatnot. You got people that might harvest. I mean, you got ones that have been lost. You've got there's so many examples of crazy stuff that's happened just randomly. I'm not saying there's any mischievousness to it. But what I am saying is there's a bunch more question marks than if you just go in person and put a mask on, make sure you're safe, you're going to keep your distance, life is good and groovy, and everything should work out. Another story that many of you haven't probably heard in the mainstream media. Why? There's a lot of these little mini stories creeping up, a lot of them. But here's just one example. 11 endangered children were rescued by U.S. Marshals in New Orleans. I've been seeing a bunch of little stories, 12 children, 11 children, 15 children, 40 children. Children are being arrested in all these different places. I'd heard a statistic that there's been over 1,000 children rescued as of the last little period of time. Over 1,000 of these types of stories that are happening. They're not talking about it anywhere, right? Because that's just crazy conspiracy talk that stuff like this happens. But yeah, guess what? Stuff like this is actually happening. Now, we're going into Monday. A lot of excitement's coming. And, of course, one of the things that's on the tips of everyone's brain right now, Graham and McConnell say Supreme Court confirmation hearings are to proceed as scheduled. We're going to see what happens with that. Donald Trump could potentially be coming back into the White House on Monday. A lot of stuff seems to be going on into this week. Got an election that's just out, just under a month now. So the entire world is going to be set in a very interesting direction in about 30 days, 29 days. I think it's important that all of us remember what's at stake, that if we, the people, actually want to be in charge of this country, it's really important that right now we try to push the direction, I think, of Trump. I think A lot of the progressives and Biden and what they're trying to do, they've talked about stacking the court. They've made threats. They're trying to censor people. They don't want people to be able to disagree with them. They actually want to put practices in place that will not allow anybody to talk about the news. Only certified people can talk about the news. There's a lot of stuff that the left is trying to push in order to make sure there's never an election again. That may sound hyperbolic to many, but I'll tell you what, that's probably, unfortunately, scarily close to the actual truth. Let's keep this in mind. We need to be paying attention, folks. See something, say something. Where we go one, we go all. It's On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle.